You can never overstate the influence that somebody has in a person's life when they take the time to pour into them and love them. Have you had that person in your life that is a mentor, or maybe it was a family member, or just somebody that took that time, especially when you were young, that influenced you forever? That's what's needed, and we're going to encourage everybody to do that so that they can also make a difference in other people's lives as well. And it's going to be the subject and a lot more of what we're going to talk about on today's episode of the Audacious Faith Podcast. You hear a lot today about the word legacy, and that is that when someone is poured into someone else's life and then that person goes on to do great things in their life, in a way, not only are they doing their own thing, but they're also a reflection on the people that have come before them. How great it is to be able to be a legacy and to also then turn around and leave one. It's even doubly great when it goes in both directions. When someone has someone that poured into their life and now they're able to then turn around and pour into the life of others. And that's what we're going to be talking about greatly in our podcast episode today. And I have a very special guest. Someone that I've been gifted with in life, another daughter that God gave to me probably, 10 years ago now? 11 years ago. And she is part of Team Tenacity, which is in San Dimas, which is one of the largest financial teams in the country, and also just doing great things with her husband, Jay Jr., and a great influence in so many lives together. So what I'm going to do today is have the great honor of talking with Ronnie Gauthier. So good to have you with us.
Thank you.
So I appreciate it. This is going to be a little different for us because usually we just talk around the table or eating at a meal or something like that. But it's great to be able to have the opportunity to have people that maybe don't know you as well, although a lot of people do, to kind of get a little more in depth and talk about some of those questions. So why don't we start off with like background, upbringing? Tell us a little bit about that, what family was like growing up, and maybe a little bit of journey of faith, how that plays in, all those type of things.
Well, I grew up not too far from here, so I don't know, 5-10 minutes from here, South El Monte, California, Southern California, and was one of 5, so I'm the second oldest of my siblings. I've got 2 brothers, 2 sisters. We were all raised by my grandma. My mom was in the picture as well, and then she also raised my cousin. So she, an amazing lady, 6 kids. Being an elderly lady, she kind of took on the challenge of raising all 6 of us. We grew up not too far from here, and faith was definitely a big part in our lives. My grandma was very, very much not only involved in church, but she practiced her faith on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. She was very much into working in prayer in her daily life. Her dropping us off at school. I remember those times because we, as kids, you want to listen to music on the radio or you want to listen to something that's entertaining. And at least as a kid, she would always put on her Christian stations and she would always play her worship music and her gospel music. And she really enjoyed that time, even if it was a short drive to work and to drop us off at school. I just remember how ingrained her faith was in every single part of her life. And I think that's why she was such a peaceful person to be around growing up. Us kids, we gravitated to her so much. We just wanted to be around her all the time. And which worked out for her because she was a second grade teacher.
Sure.
So her kids loved her. And we knew that they loved her because she would always come home with little gifts from them. Little teddy bears, little things of chocolate, just little notes.
Right.
And she was just this person who radiated love and confidence and wisdom and faith and peace. And I think that kind of spread to everyone who was around her. And she spoke openly about her love of God and her love of Jesus. And I think I've always known faith through her and seeing her live it. You know, she never really had to sit me down and say, okay, let me talk to you about God and, you know, why we're here and, you know, our purpose in life. I think I just always saw it in her. And she was very open to communicating about it, because I think one of the most important conversations I had with her about faith was, I remember asking her, because I was confused about the whole, you know, she went to a Catholic church, but, you know, I would hear her say, oh, you know, I'm Christian, and I'd hear other people say, oh, I'm Christian, are you Catholic? And I just didn't understand the whole, you know, the distinction between the two. And so one day I asked her, I was like, okay, what's the difference between being Catholic and being Christian? And she said, well, she explained the technical aspects, the literal aspects of it. But she said, what I want you to know is that above anything, it doesn't matter what church you go to. She said, it's your relationship with God that's the most important thing.
Okay.
That's what's going to bring you peace, and that's what is going to fulfill your life. And that's always stuck with me. To this day, that's the most important conversation she ever had with me in regards to faith.
Got it. So you would say, you know, a lot of people talk about faith. And a lot of people, they'll go to church or they'll have their rituals or their prayers or the different things they do. But with your grandma, what was different was that it was actually real.
It was her. It was her life.
So it wasn't just, hey, I'm going to do this when I show up at church. But then when I get home, I'm going to kick the dog, yell at the kids, have a totally different attitude, which some people do. And as a child especially, what kind of message does that often come across? It's like, okay, wait a minute, this is just something for show, this is just something you say. So in her case, this made it very real to you, is what you're saying. Because of the genuineness, it was a real part of her. Yeah,
she was the same person at church, at home. I went to, visit her in her classroom whenever I got the chance, and she was the same person with her students. And which was shocking because, it's a public school that she was working at. And so shocking, but in a good way. She was the same person all the way around with her friends. I witnessed her with her friends. As a kid, I'm watching her hang out with her teacher friends, and she's the same person.
Yeah.
And so that consistency, and I just like, God, I want to be her.
Exactly.
I want to be who she is.
So very inspiring. So you mentioned, you grew up not too far from here. It wasn't exactly what we considered a wealthy type of situation. Economically, it's probably more on the lower end.
Yes.
And not necessarily either an area or an environment, let me just say it this way, where people were always thinking of going and raising themselves to the highest of achievement levels. Correct? Would you say that's fair? And yet, your grandma, through that, despite that, instilled things in you as far as a desire to really achieve some big things, a standard of excellence, get a strong education. How would you explain her influence in that?
Well, I think she lived it because from, the stories that she told me, she was married, she adopted 2 kids, and then, they ended up getting divorced. And so she ended up becoming, a single mom of 2 kids, and then her husband ended up passing away.
Okay.
With no education, so just kind of, classes here and there, and so she decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to school. So she was volunteering at a school while also, going and getting her degree so she could become a teacher.
Okay.
And so later, she was older in life, and she would tell me, I wasn't prepared. She wasn't prepared to be able to support herself. So she went to school and she did the whole thing, and then she ended up becoming a teacher. But besides the, the literal education, the formal education part, she was always in love with learning. And another reason why I think that made her an amazing teacher, because she genuinely loved learning for the sake of learning. Our house was filled with books of anything, history, religion, kids' books. We got the Dr. Seuss, all the classics,
Right.
She was just in love with learning. And so growing up, when we were bored, she would always tell us, well, if you're bored, don't watch TV. I think at the time we only had one TV in the house, and it was usually playing some sort of sports, baseball, football,
Okay.
which at least I was not interested in. And so whenever we would complain to her, like, Mama, we're bored, she was like, go read a book. Just go read a book, or go play outside. Those are pretty much your two options. And so for me, not being so athletic, I went more towards the read a book avenue. And so she passed on that love of learning and that desire to do better and learn more and grow. And her being a teacher, she knew the area that, we were growing up in.
Right.
She was very aware of the area we were growing up in, and very aware of our financial situation, obviously, because she's like living in it. And so we were all going to public schools, and she was a teacher in the same district, but not in the same, school.
Sure.
And so she kind of handpicked my teachers for me. She knew, like, these are like the great teachers, and so she was picking them along the way. And I just remember, one of my teachers during a parent conference sitting there talking to her, saying, Ronnie is really smart. She's got a lot of potential, which everybody hates to hear the potential thing.
Did you hate to hear that?
I hate, yeah. I'm like,
Okay.
what does that mean? It sounds like a backhanded compliment to say, you have so much potential, but you're AKA, kind of wasting it.
So potential means you're not actually doing it.
Yeah,
It's in your mind. Okay.
Yeah, actually, she has so much potential. She's so intelligent. She's so smart. She learns so fast, but she's hanging out with the wrong people.
Right.
And if she continues to hang out with the wrong people, then like her life is going to take a totally different path. And so I just remember my grandma saying, okay, we're going to move you into a different school, which I didn't understand because I liked my friends. I thought my friends were great,
Sure.
but she saw something that I didn't see. And so she put me in a different environment. She enrolled me into private school, even though she really couldn't afford it. And I still can't figure out to this day how she could afford it, but she made the sacrifice. And she put me around other people who were focused on, instead of having the mentality of, this is the way I am, these are the circumstances I'm born in, so it is what it is. Instead of having that mindset, these people had a different mindset. The kids I was going to school with were thinking about going to college, were thinking about the different careers they were going to pursue. And so just being around them, I started thinking about that stuff too.
Okay, so environment was a big key. She put you in a different type of environment. Because that was the next question I was going to ask you, because there's a lot of people that have potential, obviously, but then they have their environment, and there's what's considered the norm. This is what most people are doing. And so you kind of had both, because you were in one environment and then she put you in another. You see this still with other people now. How hard does it seem to be for people to take that step to pull out of what's considered the norm that's around them? Because a lot of people just never do it. Have you noticed that?
It's hard. It's something that you have to force yourself to do. Now, that decision was made for me being younger, but I could have easily, you could easily hold on to connect, especially now with technology.
Sure.
You can so much more hold on to, past relationships and past connections, but it is hard. But the first thing is that you have to realize that your current environment isn't serving you.
So did you realize that at that point, or did you really fight it at that point?
I didn't really fight it because I trusted her, but I didn't see the need for it. But she got me excited about it. She was like, oh, they have this at school, and you're going to like this, and so went here. So she kind of got me excited about it for different reasons. So I didn't really fight her on it.
Kind of distracted you off.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, so everyone else was going to, a different, to the same public school, and I was going to go to this new school. So she kind of got me excited about it and distracted me. But I think, you have to recognize that you're in an environment that's not conducive for you to grow. And I think that's the first step to making any kind of change.
So peer pressure, maybe even family pressure, I don't know. So here you are in a different situation, and a lot of the people you know are not. Was there like a pulling back? Was there like pressure to, why are you going to, a lot of people, they go to ascend and make big decisions in life, and those who aren't necessarily prepared at that moment to do that are saying, no, stay here.
Mm-hmm.
So did you face some of that pressure?
Yeah, and I think you face it at any stage of your life, whether
Sure.
you're in elementary school or high school is
Mm-hmm.
probably a big one. College, your family and friends. Anytime that you want to do something different and
Mm-hmm.
people see that you're changing, it scares them because they feel like they're losing you, or they feel like they're losing whatever version of you that they're attached to.
Okay.
And so they, of course, they want to keep you where you're at. And so you get things like, oh, you think you're better than us, or you're different now, you're changing, or, what happened to you? You used to be fun. Like, all these phrases are things that you hear
Yeah.
when you decide to do something different.
So why do you think that most people, they'll hear that, and instead of facing that and continuing to move forward, they'll just shrink back?
I think for a lot of different reasons, but, wanting to please people is a big one. Because
Right.
usually it's people around you who you love or you care about or you enjoy being around.
Sure.
And so it's shocking to at first think, oh, they're going to be happy for me because I'm doing something good for myself.
Right.
But it's the complete opposite reaction. So then you're like, oh, well, I don't want to disappoint them, or I don't want to make them feel bad. So a lot of people end up saying, you know what, forget it. I didn't really want to do that anyways. They end up compromising what they really wanted because they want to make other people happy,
And in the end, it probably doesn't make anybody happy, right?
It really doesn't make anybody happy because you being stuck is one of the most miserable feelings, but it's a miserable that you're used to and accustomed to.
Right, so it's kind of accepted. What would you say, growing up then, so you get in your later teens and then young adulthood, it faces challenges, obviously. You're making big shifts. You're going through education. You're now away from home. You go out to Riverside, where you're attending college out there. Were there some big challenges that stand out that you really had to work through that were very difficult?
Oh, yeah. Going to college in itself, it was such a, it wasn't a culture shock, but it was a shock to my system because I couldn't wait to go to college. I couldn't wait to move out. My grandma was an amazing person and she did the best that she could, but in a lot of ways, like, our home environment was very toxic. We struggled financially, so there's a lot of issues that come along with that. There's 6 of us in there, kids. We're just talking about kids, 6 kids plus, the adults. And so I couldn't wait to get out, to have my own space, to be able to do my own thing. But then once I was able to do that, I don't know if I was in survival mode when I was at home, but the second I got to school, I just completely fell into a very deep depression.
Okay.
And it started feeling like maybe I'm just not one of those people who is meant to be happy. It started feeling like maybe this is just me. This is just my makeup. This is just how I was built. I'm just not a happy person. I'm not a bubbly person. I'm not a high energy person. I'm not an optimistic person. And so all this stuff hit me, trying to figure out how to live independently and trying to figure out who I am outside of my family. And go to school and pay for, whatever I needed to pay for. It just completely just hit me all at once. And it was just a very difficult road from that point.
Well, it brings up an interesting question that you're mentioning because you make the statement, maybe I'm not the person that's meant to be happy. That in and of itself is acknowledging that something is meant or not meant to be. So it's acknowledging the higher power or God, or even though a lot of times people don't realize that when they're making that statement. What is the rationale? Because you're not the only one. There's a lot of people that are listening to this right now, and they may have similar thoughts going, it's just not meant to be for me. That's just the way my life is. Okay? What's the rationale that goes into that thinking that somehow that's what's written in the stars or whatever, that for you, happiness is not in the plan? What were you thinking at that time? Can you remember?
I just felt like I had zero control over my life. And I was just going with the flow.
Okay.
So I think taking zero responsibility and taking zero control over, or even attempting to, I just, felt like if this is where I am and how I feel, then it's stagnant. That's it. It's written in stone. Like, there's nothing else. It was a very like daunting feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, so this brings up a question, because I've been dealing with this issue a lot with people lately, and then you go on to get your degree in psychology.
Yeah.
So you're the one for me to ask this question to. One of the biggest causes of anxiety, from what I've seen, is exactly what you're just mentioning, feeling that things are out of control. And when things are out of control and you can't fix it, then it throws people completely into a problem. Okay? So as you were you studying that at the same time that you're going, or that came a little bit later?
After,
Was
yeah.
it part of what caused you to then to want to learn about that, or?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I was undecided when I went into school. You know, my grandma's just like, you'll figure it out when you get there. You just move in the right direction, and then you'll kind of end up where you're supposed to be. And so I was just taking a bunch of courses. So intro to psychology, almost everyone either takes that or like sociology. Yeah. Like an intro class, right? And so I started learning about this stuff, and I'm like, okay, this does not have to be the way it is. You know, things can change. And so I kind of became obsessed with the idea of like, I can change things in my life. I can change the way I feel. I can change the way I think. I can change pretty much anything, right, about my life that I really, really want to. And I think that's very empowering.
Definitely. So you're going through that, and you're kind of discovering this as you go along. Then there's a point where your grandma gets more health challenges. So you're out there at this point, as she's getting those health challenges. So I'm assuming that may have caused even more of a conflict. Where you're there and she's probably telling you take care of what you need to take care of. I'm assuming she's probably saying that. Yet at the same time, I'm sure you're concerned about her because she was such a strong influence. So did that cause more anxiety, or?
Oh yeah, that was one of the biggest, I think, contributing factors, is because when I was there, all I wanted to do was be back home. And so I was on the phone with her every single day. I just want to come home. I just want to come home because I just felt like I'm losing this time with you. Yeah. And I just, you know, financially, like, I didn't have the best car to be able, it was breaking down like once a month. And financially to be able to pay for the gas to go back and forth. Because it is driving distance, but it's like just not, an hour, right? Down the street. Yeah. Exactly. It's about an hour one way. And so, you know, she wanted me to stay in school, you know, before anything, but I just wanted to be home all the time. So when I was in class, I wanted to be there. And it, like you said, it caused a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, just felt stuck and trapped in my situation.
Yeah. All right. So in the midst of all this that we've been talking about, then you meet someone, probably unexpected. You meet Jay Jr. Yeah. And at first, that would probably seem like a really crazy match to people because personality-wise, in many ways, at least at that time, totally different. Yeah. He's very outgoing, talking to everybody. You've already been discussing, you kind of withdrew more and saying to yourself, I'm not that type of person. More introverted, definitely, at that point at least. And so then you end up, I mean, there's so much we could go into on that, on how all that came about, but we need a whole separate hour for that probably. But so you end up, the relationship continues, you end up getting married. In some ways, you're still very much opposite in some ways, and in other ways not. So how do you feel that you guys balance each other? Because I've noticed that, but how do you see that?
I've never felt like we were that different. I think the way that we express our like personalities and our values and our standards, I think they're different. Because like you said, you know, he tends to be a little bit more, you know, talkative and things like that. But I've never felt like we were really that different. Even when we met, upbringing's totally different. But even at the point that we met, you know, I was going through a tough time, but he was going through a tough time too. He just, the world didn't know it. Right. And I think growing up, we've just grown together in every aspect of life, as far as our, careers go, and our faith has gone, and our marriage, our relationships with other people. I feel like we've grown in the same direction, and we've grown at the same rate and together. And so that in and of itself is very balancing, if that's the word that you like to use. I'm not a big fan of the word like balance, but I think we complement each other.
I would agree with you there. I definitely agree with you there. So maybe that's a better word, complement, rather than balance. I will say this, though, as far as one difference that I see, is that he tends to be much more impulsive.
Yeah.
So it's he gets something in his head, it's like, let's just...
Yes.
And you seem to be the level that comes along and says, let's think this through for a second. Yeah. That may not be the best idea. Yeah. So that's maybe what I meant a little bit more. I think that he's maybe pulled you to do things that you would not have done on your own in some cases, and at the same time you've held him back from doing dumb things that he would have done probably quite often without that counter thought to it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that 100%. I think, he has like a great idea, or what he feels like is a great idea, a big idea, and then I help him kind of focus it and tweak it or redirect it and just make it make sense and make it better. But he does, like you said, he does the same for me too. It's just not as obvious, as far as like decisions, because I keep a lot, I'm more private than I think he is. And so he does the same for me as well, where I'm just like, okay, I think I'm going to do this. And he's like, well, consider options B, C, and D first. Yeah. So we're good about that, and I think we're really good at taking feedback from each other, and we know each other obviously at this point really well, and so we kind of know how to communicate that as well.
Right, and then you mentioned earlier your love of reading, which kind of, because sports were in it, and that was really the only alternative, so that kind of bred inside of you. And then you love actually reading books, and now, of course, to maximize time, you'll do audiobooks and all of those things, which he now does as well. And I can tell you from the past, as well, that he didn't read anything. So that's quite a switch. I would say that I'm sure has been an influence that came from you, a lot of it, and I'm sure that's been a benefit to him as well. So the more we're learning and the more things are getting ingrained, the more we change and the more we personally develop. So now you end up in business together, which is a total, again, shift of the original plan.
Yes.
You're going towards now, you're getting your master's degree to be a school psychologist, which is what you're going to do. You started to intern in that area, getting experience in that area, and he ends up chasing after what was kind of a childhood dream, which was going into the fire department. Goes through EMT training. EMT is really ridiculous how little they pay to be an EMT.
Right.
And he's thinking, okay, this is not it. I mean, here they are handling people's lives, and they're getting paid basically minimum wage, which is nuts. And so he goes through that. He goes into the fire academy. Amazingly, gets disciplined, where that was really not his strong suit before that, and goes through that. So it's all set. Child psychologist at school, fire department, firemen, it's all set. That's going to be it. Life's planned out. And then total shift. Shift. So he ends up going into business, something that you fairly quickly after he was in it saw that would maybe fit his personality and be a definite spot for him. That wasn't your plan?
No.
So when did it shift? What happened?
Like you mentioned, I was going to school at the time. I was finishing up my degree and working, actually doing the job interning while he was starting his career, in business. And he was so excited. He was genuinely like a kid, like excited about it. He was excited to get up, put on a suit, grab his briefcase, leave every single day, and he was so excited. Like I had never seen him that excited about any like career choice that he decided to,
So when he was working at Pep Boys, that wasn't
No.
the same? Okay.
No, not, yeah, that's not
For,
even.
by the way, about 1 week, if you're wondering how long.
A whole week.
Yeah.
So even the fire department, he was so much more excited, and he was starting to read. I saw at least he was carrying around a book.
He carried the book. Yeah.
He was carrying around a book, so that was the first step. And so I'm like, oh, that's awesome. He's starting to self-develop and read, and he's really excited to get up every morning, and he just seems super motivated. And I'm going to school, and I'm about to graduate, and I'm already kind of working in the field that I'm graduating, to be able to do. And I'm just not as excited. And not because, I loved working with the kids. I loved sitting across from them and being able to help them and coach them and mentor them and counsel them and help them with their school progress. I loved all that stuff. But there was so much politics involved, and it just felt very constricting. And I'm like, wow, this is going to be... I'm seeing a glimpse of my future in my life for the next, however long I'm going to be working till I'm 65 or 70 or whatever. And I'm like, all right, it's not as amazing as I thought it was going to be, but it's still helping somebody, right? Still helping kids. But he was just so, the contrast was like, I was like, okay, this is okay, but he's like really excited. And so I think that just made me more open to the idea of working with him. And so when he suggested it, I was in transition of, a school year had ended, a new school year was coming up, and he's like, hey, why don't we work together? And we hadn't worked together since we both worked at Hollister.
Which is a totally different industry, right?
So. And he was just so excited about it that I think I kind of blindly just did it.
Okay.
And kind of made that leap. I always figured, hey, if I hate it, I can always go and be a school psychologist. I have my degree. So I just blindly went into it and decided to figure it out on the way to doing it.
So along with the title of our podcast, which is Audacious Faith, which is taking a real crazy step, something that is not scripted, is not planned, is not the norm, believing that somehow God has this plan to do something out of the ordinary. That's really what you guys did.
Yeah.
And that was a real game-changing moment because things were okay, but from that point, they tended to really start taking off, right? Becoming more of a team, developing a team, again, using both of the gifts that he has, you have, and fulfilling some of the same roles, but at the same time, some of the different roles, and being able to take care of some of that. Then how did that further your development? Because you're not the same person. I mean, you are, but you're much more personally developed now than you were at that moment. So what have been some of the biggest changes that took place there?
They always say that you don't grow unless you're put into an uncomfortable situation. Well, this was me being put into an uncomfortable situation for me, like every single day.
Yeah.
So growing up, stressed out about finances, stressed out about like the future, all I ever wanted was that security. I wanted to know, okay, this is where I'm going to work, this is where I live, it's safe, the bills are paid, I know my bills are paid, I have savings. That was like the dream. I wasn't asking for, like a mansion or, millions of dollars. I just wanted security. And starting a business is the complete opposite. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to make money. You don't know if it's going to work out. And so I just felt completely uncomfortable every single day in so many different aspects of dealing with people and dealing with conflict and public speaking. I was not much of a public speaker. I had to do some of it for, classrooms and, with kids and stuff. In college, you had to do presentations. But this was like adults, your peers and training people, and frequently, like all of the time, having to do it. And so it just made me incredibly uncomfortable. And when you're uncomfortable, you have two options, really. You either rise to the occasion, making mistakes, but growing and learning while you're doing it, or you just kind of revert back and go, no, it was good the way before. I'll just go back, I'll just be a school psychologist. Nothing wrong with that, but, I have grown so much because of every single uncomfortable situation that I've put myself in.
It's interesting that you bring that up because we're at a convention and I'm hearing, okay, the MC for the morning is going to be Ronnie.
Yeah.
And I know Ronnie, and I'm thinking, whoa, that is a very uncomfortable situation. I could not picture that at first because I hadn't really seen you have to do those type of things. And I'm thinking, I know that was not the most natural before.
Right, yeah.
But it's amazing how when you just take that step, a person can rise to the occasion because you're up there doing this, commanding the room, and I'm thinking, who is this? It was a total change. And the more you did it, the more you were able to step into that and continue to develop doing that, including with the team, which now is like 200 people plus,
Right.
and having to have that constant interaction where before maybe you just kind of do your own thing when you were having those struggles and things in early adulthood. Now, like you mentioned, now you're not just dealing with kids. Adults can be childlike as well, and sometimes even worse. Kids we at least understand.
Right.
With adults, it's like, why are you acting like this? And it doesn't go away in adulthood. People have their issues constantly more than most people probably realize that you see behind the scenes,
Yeah.
right? So taking this now, would you say this has been a recurring theme in our podcast? Some people would hear your story and think you're crazy. I mean, here you went through not only regular undergrad education, but then graduate education. That's a lot of money, that's a lot of time, that's a lot of studying.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
now you're going to throw all of that time and effort seemingly away for something that may or may not work. You guys take a lease on an office
Yeah.
with a team of about 8 people at the time that's going to cost you at least like $5,000 a month
Yeah.
with no guarantee of being able to pay that. Some people saying they're going to chip in, but you have no way to make them do that. And so totally on faith that this is what you're supposed to do. It wasn't even normal protocol to do that. In fact, people later were like, what did you do?
Yeah.
This is not the way you do it. There's people that have been in business even to this day way longer than you guys had that still have not taken any step like that. What were you thinking?
We just wanted to succeed so badly, and we wanted to fast forward it. And so we knew, okay, at some point we'd need an office because we're going to build this firm.
Yeah.
That's in our heads. We're gonna have hundreds of agents like coming to this office. So the first thing in our heads was well, we need an office.
Yeah.
And timing, okay, I would not advise people to do it exactly the way we did it, financially and things like that. But I don't believe that anything happens for no reason. Like everything serves a purpose. Even me going to the University of Laverne, in Laverne, it made us move out there when we got married, and we ended up opening an office nearby. And the people that we know and the people that we work with are people who we would not have met if we hadn't done that.
Right.
And so I think everything happens for a reason, and it forced us to grow really, really, really fast in a professional sense, in a mindset sense, just maturity-wise, because we're still young. We're still in our early 20s when this happens. And although I wouldn't advise people to open up an office kind of blindly, I wouldn't change anything about it because it helped create us into, who we are today.
Absolutely. It definitely worked out.
Yeah.
Huge step of faith to
That
take
was definitely by the grace of God every single step of the way, because financially, if you're looking at the numbers, you're like, how is this going to make sense? And it didn't, but we just kind of walked on, on faith, and he carried us all the way through.
Exactly, and this included not just the bare bones of an office, it included fixing up that office, it included buying chairs, which were a major expense.
Yeah.
Because someone had sat on the plastic chair and shredded the thing, and you're going to have a lawsuit on your hands. So
Right,
it
yeah.
included all types of investments and expenses along the way, and yet it seemed that God just kept providing every time you would take that step and do that, which is a lesson to us because a lot of people want to have all the T's crossed and the I's dotted beforehand before they'll make a move. Do you believe that to do anything big in life, God also very often says you're going to have to take some bold step of faith and not know that you have everything set and just trust me?
Yeah, you're never going to have that security that you want, that guarantee that you want that it's going to work out. And so when God points you in a direction, he's relying on you to start walking, like start moving, and I'll put the pieces like in front, right?
Right.
And that's what it felt like. It felt like, okay, we know this is what we're supposed to be doing. We know this is the direction that we need to be moving in. It's really scary right now. It's very stressful. Again, with the financial stresses that I can't seem to get rid of no matter what, right? And we're just moving and it's hard, but we're like, we know this is going to work out. We know this is going to work out, but we're taking action this whole entire time. You know, a lot of times people make the mistake of they're like waiting instead of taking action. They're just like waiting for like the storm to pass, or they're waiting for things to the questions to answer themselves. Like it's not going to come. You have to start. I feel like you have to start moving for God to start working in your life.
So how many things would you have actually done in life if you had waited for the ideal circumstances?
Oh, none of them. I don't think anything has ever happened. You know, anything great, I should say, has ever happened because, you know, it was like the perfect timing for it to occur. It always felt like the wrong time. You know, it always felt uncomfortable. It always felt scary.
Right. So taking the skills then that you learned and now dealing with people on a constant basis, this is a curious question. People talk about those who have gone through the type of training that you've gone through. Do people that have your training see people's behavior and psychoanalyze what they're doing, or how does it work? I mean, you kind of have an understanding a lot of why people are doing what they do. So this all plays into now, how much has it helped you to at least have an understanding of why people are reacting the way they are?
It helps to be a lot more empathetic, to be more compassionate, because, you know, not that I'm like psychoanalyzing anybody, but you just are way more open to seeing things from their perspective, I would say, or trying to see things from their perspective. You start looking at people and like, okay, somebody just flipped me off, you know, like when I was trying, not literally, but if they do, because it does happen.
So obviously they have a problem that they're dealing with.
Yeah, obviously they're having a bad day. It's not me. Well, maybe it was me, you know.
Maybe you cut them off.
Maybe I did something, but I don't know if it justified the reaction, even if I did. But it's probably something that's going on with them. And it kind of frees you from that, you know, from those negative emotions of like, what did I do? It's like, God, they must be having a really bad day, you know. Hopefully that turns around for them. So it helps in just everyday life. It helps in business, you know, helping people get from where they are to where they want to be. Sometimes you can see things that maybe they're, you know, struggling with. And I definitely think that it helps. Helps me, too. It helps me grow to the next level because I keep growing and learning in that field. I started in that field because it was something I was genuinely interested in, and psychology is something I still self-study till this day. So I don't think I'll ever stop learning about it and learning about people and about myself.
So you mentioned empathy, which I'm not sure that everybody would respond that way, though. It was a very interesting answer that you bring across, because sometimes when people know what's going on, they have no patience for it at all. But you're saying that you have the opposite reaction, where because you understand it, it actually, you want to define, I mean, some people don't know what empathy actually is. So what does that mean to you?
I mean, I don't know what I can't quote from the dictionary for you, but it's basically, it's you can put yourselves in their you can put yourself in their shoes.
Yes.
And have their perspective and see like, okay, you can feel for them. You know,
Right.
you can feel for them. You can sympathize with that. Now, I say that with also caution, where you can have empathy for people without letting them, you know, take advantage of you or, you know, manipulate you or use you as a doormat. I think sometimes people misconstrue those
Because that's
two
not beneficial to
concepts.
them either, to let them do that.
Exactly, yeah. You can understand where someone's coming from and, you know, and feel for them and, you know, hope and wish them good things. But it's also really important to protect yourself and make sure that just because you understand why they're doing it doesn't mean that it's okay that they're doing it to you if there is something they're doing.
So taking those skills and putting them into business now, financial services, helping people build legacies for their family, put them in a better position, protect them for the case of an emergency, health crisis that comes up, a sudden death in the family, all those type of things. A lot of people look at that industry and they don't like it. They look at it and they see people that do those things as salesmen, those who are just trying to sell, those who are just trying to make money.
Right.
And I think we all know and agree that people don't like to be sold. Everyone's always pitching their thing. You look on the internet and everyone's pitching this, buy that. You know, I need this opportunity constantly. But people do want to buy things. People do want to be a part of something.
Right.
So from my observation and being involved with it with you as well, isn't it true that probably what you're just mentioning here, one of the greatest qualities is not trying to sell people, but actually coming alongside them and wanting things for people, wanting to help them fulfill their dreams, get the things that they want, and take care of the fears and protect them against the things that might hurt them. It's more of that empathy. It's more of that family thought. Is that what really goes in? I think that's what's been a lot of the reason for the success. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. I think it's a lot. It's, especially when it comes to finance, in any field, I think, you know, when it comes to finances, coming from nothing, you know, being broke and growing up broke and as a young adult being broke and starting to learn like, okay, how does money work? You know, how can I save? How can I do this? How can I do that? And trying to self-educate yourself in those areas, you remember what it's like to feel confused and struggling to figure that stuff out. And so when you're sitting with people, you're like, all you have to do is communicate the goal, which is like, hey, like I know what it feels like to not know what any of this stuff means and to just want to start doing something, but I don't know how. And I'll show you like what I've learned. It's just educating people and, you know, being there for people and understanding like, I know how you got in your situation because I was there too.
So that's the feel, the felt, and the found type of thing that
Yeah.
people would do. Let's go ahead and we'll start wrapping up towards the end because I don't know that, although this is very interesting, I don't know that people want to watch a 2-hour podcast, but I think we could go for 3-4 hours on a lot of this stuff. But there's going to be people that are out there right now that maybe they talk about big dreams. They've had them in their head, and maybe life is kicking them in the butt at this point.
Yeah.
Been a lot of disappointments, a lot of things that have come along. And because of that, they might feel it's too late. I'm just stuck. Okay, what would you say to them? What comes to your mind? They shouldn't be at a point where they just give up. What comes to your mind when you think of that?
Whenever I felt stuck, because people always say, oh, you know, what do you want out of life? And sometimes I think when we're talking about what we want out of life, sometimes we're talking about it like if it's a wish. Like we've got 3 wishes and we've got a genie and like, oh, this would be cool and that would be cool. But sometimes I think what's more powerful is asking ourselves what we're no longer willing to tolerate. And that can be more motivating to get you unstuck than the things that you are wanting. And I think every single time that I've made a big decision, it was because of that. It was, of course, like I want all the amazing things. I have these big dreams and I want to live this certain lifestyle and be able to help people. And all that is amazing and it's energizing and it gives me hope. But sometimes to get yourself to move, you kind of have to be like, all right, but what are we sick of? What are we really freaking tired of? And a lot of what I was focused on during those difficult times of getting the office going and the start of business was, I am so tired of trying to figure out how we're going to pay the office rent this month. We have to get this thing going. And that was motivating for me, and that helped get me unstuck, where some days I just felt like the stress is so heavy, where I feel like I cannot get out of bed today. But I was like, but if I do not get out of bed today, this office is never going to take off. And so that was enough motivation to get me out. So sometimes you got to be very crystal clear on what you're sick of and what you no longer want to tolerate.
And what you're afraid of tolerating for the rest of your life if you don't change it, right?
Yeah, because that's what'll end up happening. That scares me, to have something that I don't like or don't like. It doesn't even have to be hate. It could just be a mild dislike for something in my life. But it to be there for the next 5, 10, that's terrible
to have to
me.
keep living it.
Yeah.
And some people, unfortunately, will stay there if they don't make that move.
Yeah.
Some people would look at where you guys have come, what's happened, and they would say, they've made it. They've arrived, all good. But I get the sense that you're not done. I get the sense that there's more goals, there's more things, there's stuff that's out there. Has God put anything in your heads, in your hearts, that you're still moving towards? Because after all, when we stop growing, then we're dying at that point. So I'm sure there's something next. Any sense of that?
Yeah, there's an overwhelming feeling of we just haven't helped enough people.
Okay.
And that's on, helping people with their finances, but also helping people do the same things that we've done as far as like their career goals go, because we do a lot of mentorship.
Right.
And so I just am very clear on where we have not helped enough people get to where they want to be.
And why is it inbred in your heart to have to help people? Just curious.
I think that's where most of the fulfillment comes from, is being, because I know, like, obviously from firsthand experience, how life-changing it can be. And, we would just want to be able to help people change their life in whatever way they want.
I'm smiling because I see the full circle. Okay, you got your grandma who, honestly, in many ways, people could have looked at her life and said, it would have been easier for her if she just took care of herself and didn't have to go and put all the sacrifice in to doing all that she did to pour into your life. But she wanted to help. She, out of love and out of compassion and out of all of that, that's what she wanted to do. That's how she found her fulfillment. And now, that's exactly what you're saying. That truly was put in you in such a way that now that's what will give you the greatest fulfillment, to be able to do that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So that puts us right back to what we said in the beginning, which was about legacy, on how when someone pours into someone else and that carries on and it goes to another person as well. All right, so for the person that's out there now that maybe is thinking that their opportunities have dried up, it's just not there, what would be your advice to take that first step?
Well, I would say mentorship is really important. Like, we would not have gotten where we're at without seeking out advice and seeking out help. We've just gotten in the habit of doing it so much that we literally do it for everything. If we're gonna buy a car, if we're gonna, anything, buy a blender, we're always seeking out advice from people. And so I would say start there. Start with somebody who, in whatever area you're trying to change, seek out their advice and see how they got to where they're at and see what their first steps were, and if they could go back, if they would change anything. Start asking questions, and then you'll start finding the answers of like, okay, I think I need to be moving in this direction. But most of all, you got to take that action, because you can collect all the information you want, but if you don't start moving in a direction, you're just going to be stagnant.
So don't just sit there.
Yes.
but do something. Otherwise, you're going to accept, like you said, to not do anything is to tolerate the way that it is.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Well, I so appreciate your time today coming in and having this discussion. And even though some of it I knew, I learned a whole lot more. And if you want to reach out to Ronnie, be sure to do that. You can do it. We'll have contact information underneath the video that's there in YouTube or in the podcast sections, wherever they are. We also encourage you to subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss a single episode. And we're just very thankful for you, and we're going to hope that you're going to be able to go out and be that legacy in the lives of many others as well. So God bless each one of you. This has been the Audacious Faith Podcast.